everyone, and welcome to another episode of the vAuto podcast. I'm Lance Helgeson with vAuto, and today I'm joined by Greg Palmer, who's the Inventory and Marketing Director for the Ron Marhofer organization. Greg, good morning and welcome to you.
Good morning, Lance. Thanks for having me.
You bet. It's a pleasure to have you on the program. Now, perhaps as a place to start for today's podcast, I know we want to talk about ProfitTime and kind of how that's working in your dealership and some of the maybe challenges and opportunities that relate to that. But as a place to start, if you might, Greg, give our listeners a sense of your role and responsibilities there at Marhofer and a little bit of your career background. What led you to your current position?
Sure. So I've been with the Ron Marhofer Auto Family for going on 8 years. I came in as a buyer for one of our stores, a used car buyer, without previous background in the car business. So previously, I actually worked for a college textbook retailer, and there were a lot of parallels there as far as acquiring used book inventory, pricing to the market, buying used textbooks from consumers, reselling them. We had wholesale inventory, we had retail inventory, so a lot of parallels able to draw there. So I came in, started buying cars for one of our 5 locations, then started buying for another location, then became in charge of our buying center. We have centralized it where we buy inventory. And started taking on pricing for everyone and new car pricing, new car ordering, marketing, websites. How I guess I always describe it is I'm involved with about everything that has to do with selling a car except for actually selling a car.
Interesting. One question. So what's an appraisal look like with a book compared to the car business?
Well, it's more so just whether it's something that's going to be used again or not in the next term. So if it's something that's going to be used again in the next term, that's retail inventory, like a retail trade-in, versus it's not going to be used again, and then it's a wholesale piece at that point, and you're going to send it to a wholesaler, or maybe it just is disposed of and recycled.
Okay, interesting. Well, let's shift gears here, Greg, and get into the meat of the matter for the podcast, and that is ProfitTime. And I understand that you've had ProfitTime at your dealership for some time, but over the past couple of years, maybe the adoption of ProfitTime and the investment value method of managing inventory hasn't been as solid as maybe you would have liked it. So tell me a little bit about why the adoption wasn't as universal, perhaps, as it could have been when you guys first put ProfitTime in place.
Sure. So as you mentioned, we've been on the ProfitTime system since the beginning. And in the beginning, I feel like we used it more as a let's look at it tool, and maybe this will help us to make pricing decisions, but not a full buy into it. And as time went on, we start buying into it and pricing and repricing based on the guidelines. Unfortunately, whenever we see any sort of a downturn in retail volume, the discipline would start to go out the window and start making more blanketed changes across and not following the ProfitTime principles, just trying to chase volume in a more undisciplined approach.
So how would that manifest on a day-to-day basis? So perhaps you come in on a Monday, the weekend was a little softer than you might like, and suddenly you're kind of across the board cutting prices to move in?
I think that's a fair way to describe it, and maybe holding out a little bit on the platinums, but maybe not really, or maybe looking at a platinum saying, well, if we could sell that this week and make $3,000 on it, I'll take that, but not really trying to fully realize the potential of profit on each unit.
And tell me a little bit about, I certainly understand, cutting a price on a car where even with the price cut, you're looking at a $3,000 gross.
Sure.
What about those bronze cars, maybe where that margin was a little much leaner, probably?
I think on the other side of the coin, to your point, it would be like, well, let's hold on this one for a little bit, and maybe we can get this out of it. And that, so meanwhile, you're reinverting your inventory, and pretty soon you're back to an inverted profit time screen.
So to translate that into words that maybe Dale Pollock might use, you were being more proud of the cars for which you shouldn't have been the most proud of, and
Sure.
the least proud of the ones you should have been.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
fair.
So we talked a little bit before the podcast recording here, Greg, and you shared that, as of this past August 2021, you guys made a commitment to make the adoption stick and be a bit more universal. What were the factors that led you to that conclusion and said, this is how we got to do it?
Well, there's several factors. So obviously, dealing with the ability to acquire inventory being very, very difficult from the auction or otherwise, just very high prices. And even if you want to pay them, just not even having any inventory. So we've been looking at the operation saying, we don't want to sacrifice on volume. So how are we going to continue and make it an acceptable margin? And additionally, I'm involved in an NCM velocity group with probably some of the listeners of this podcast. And in our meeting in August, the group pointed out to me, we had, of everyone in the group, the lowest adoption of ProfitTime, and also some of the lowest front end grosses compared to the rest of the group. And there were a lot of higher adopters in the group who were making points to me, and I asked a lot of questions about what they were doing and how they're seeing it, and I could see they were seeing it through in a more long-term strategy. So when I came back from that and met with our leadership team here and discussed what we were seeing, we decided that this is time to go all in and see it through, and now we're seeing the results.
Okay, and if I may just kind of jump back to that 20 group meeting you referenced, Greg. So when we talk about adoption, I believe you're referring to like percentage of your cars that are aligned.
Yes.
What was that looking like back then overall? And I'm kind of curious, maybe within the buckets too.
Yeah. So the overall at that meeting, I remember, was 14%.
Okay.
Adoption. And the question was asked, well, why do you even have it? And candidly, I couldn't completely answer that.
But was it high? I guess so. Pretty much, that means there wasn't any category or bronze, silver,
Correct.
gold, or platinum where you guys were okay.
Yeah, that's
sticking
correct.
with the recommendations. All right. So what did you do? You mentioned that you're seeing the results. How would you characterize the results? Tell me a little bit about maybe what is happening with gross profit and volume, which ProfitTime is designed to optimize for your group since August, since you guys have really buckled down.
Sure. So we're up a few $100s, probably $300 to $400 in gross profit. We've seen our average days to sale on bronze come down. We've seen our overall volume still be up year over year, between 15 and 20%, depending on the month. We've had a couple months now here of August and September, trending well here in October. So overall, good results. I mean, there's not, honestly, I can't give you a bad metric that's come from it. Reduced losses on the bronzes, because let's face it, the bronzes are negative front end grosses for us.
Yes.
And higher profits on the platinum cars, and even a couple days more to sale on the platinums, but not a significant change there. It's just more holding on to that price and trusting the metrics and being willing to ask the money and get the money when it's there.
So on the bronze vehicles, what's the then and now picture in terms of days to sale? What's the improvement been there?
We were at 47 days to sale on our bronze at that time.
Okay.
As of this week, we're down to 37. So 10 days. That was pretty significant.
That is significant. And tell me a little bit, Greg, about how you have maybe set up your expectations, for days to sale, and perhaps how you regard the pricing recommendations across the precious metal categories in ProfitTime.
Sure. So pricing strategy wise, I just kind of looked at each precious metal and set a pricing range for each one. So, for example, on the platinum vehicles, said we're going to price these at 100% to 102% on day one. These are loose guidelines, right? But I got to have something. So 100 to 102, and we're going to hold close to that price for 45 days. Once the vehicle hits over 45 days, then we're going to enter an exit strategy of a significant reduction on the vehicle if it's not sold, and then roughly a 1% reduction from there. And then gold go down 98 to 100% with a 35-day exit strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Silver 96 to 98 with a 30-day exit strategy, and then bronze going to be about 94 to 96 day one, and exit strategy is really day one. So I force myself now to look at every bronze vehicle that is out of alignment, showing too low every single day, and have to justify every single day why I'm out of alignment based on the pricing recommendations.
What's an example of one of those cars, Greg, where you may say, okay, I know this is telling me to drop it, but I'm not going to do that today?
Sure. So say like a Silverado LT crew cab with Midnight Edition package.
Okay.
So I don't really have a way to capture the value of that package. Mm-hmm. So it may say I'm out of alignment on it, but I know that that's a vehicle that sells well and that will sell above the bronze pricing recommendation.
So you just know that car's got something special that merits that.
Sure.
Hanging that little.
Tend to run a little different strategy on the certified pre-owned units that we sell as well. A little higher, even if they're bronze.
I'm curious, you mentioned the exit strategy that might, and let's maybe focus for a moment on the platinum cars for a moment. Mm-hmm. At 45 days, that's a trigger point.
Yep.
And there's a price reduction at that point, 5-6%, something like that.
Somewhere in that range, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right around there, and then fall each week with typically around a 1% reduction.
So I want to look at two things there. From day 1 to day 45 on those platinum cars, is it at a specific price and stays there, or how do you evaluate what's going on with that vehicle in that first 45-day window?
So in that first 45-day window, I'll stay roughly in that pricing range, but I will vary from it if the VDPs don't support it,
mm-hmm.
leads don't support it. Additionally, if there's a change in the market. So if the vehicle is 102% and there's been depreciation in the market, which we haven't been seeing as much of recently, but in a typical market, then we would reduce as such. So I'm not going to hold my initial price for 45 days. I'm going to still follow the market on it, and I'm still going to follow my other metrics that I'm looking at.
Do you find, Greg, that the ProfitTime recommendations are even tracking the market where you might get nudged a little bit to move the price just because the system kind of knows something about the market?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So funny enough, I found this strategy to pair up very well with the ProfitTime pricing recommendations. So because as a car ages now, as they've come out with 2.0, I feel like there's a lot more to the recommendations now. Something we struggled with previously was, well, as the car gets older, it just keeps recommending you to price it here. Well, now I feel like it really lines up with as a car ages and your experience with it.
So and let me play that back.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like so you when you came up with those price to market percentages, that was really your best judgment, that you overlaid that, but what you're seeing is that the recommendations are actually falling essentially into the range you thought they should.
Yeah, very close, very high adoption rate based on our strategy lining up with the ProfitTime ones.
So that's now I understand, because you're the guy that handles the pricing. Those decisions are yours. That's your job. But tell me a little bit about what feedback or pushback you've had from the stores as you guys laid down the approach in August and said we're gonna roll with this.
Sure. So we, as you mentioned, I do all of the pricing and repricing for all of our vehicles across the organization. So originally we had team leaders, sales managers price their trade-ins, and I wouldn't reprice them for the first 15 days.
Okay.
So that's something that we stopped doing, more so to find opportunity in the gold and platinum units, because I think we're all programmed to say, if we take in a car and we sell it quickly and we make whatever your number is, everyone's different. Let's say it's $3,000, then that's a win, right? So by doing that and be able to look at them more from an investment strategy and more of a maximization strategy, then we were able to raise profits on these. Some of the pushback was some people wanted to sell the vehicle quickly, make money on it, and then on the flip side, say on the bronze, well, we had to pay up for that one. Let's wait a little bit and try to make some money on it. Which, sure, all understandable, all things we want to do, but when you follow the metrics and you follow what it's telling you, you end up with a better result. So there's been some conversations in regards to, because it can be opposite thinking of what traditionally you've had. You get a car, you spin it quick, you make a good gross profit on it, you're happy. You pay up for a car, you're like, well, maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe we'll hold the price a little higher and get lucky and sell it. It's just over time and over tens, hundreds, thousands of transactions, that just doesn't happen.
So in some ways, you kind of flipped where the sense of urgency needs to be on the bronze. So was that difficult to unwind that thinking that we paid up for this car, and I guess given the way the current market is, you kind of have to almost price it right out of the gate at a loss. How did that pill go down?
Well, here I feel like I've got a lot of trust with our team, and I've been handling the pricing and repricing for several years. So I'd say overall very well. It's just more having conversations and go back and forth and explaining and getting buy-in and answering questions about it and seeing it through.
I would also imagine that some of those richer grosses on the gold and platinums kind of help ease the pain.
Sure, absolutely.
So this is maybe not a fair question to ask, Greg, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You made the commitment to stick with ProfitTime, to have high adoption as of August, but we all know that the market was rocking, before then, from maybe call it April all the way through the summer, with a couple of bumps and such. But if you had that adoption that you have today back then, what do you think things would look like on the department financials for used cars for you guys?
Well, that's a good question. I'll say we would be in a better position now had we followed this discipline back then, because, and I'll say more specifically with the bronze, I would say if we would have followed some of the bronze recommendations closer back then, we wouldn't have experienced some of the losses that we did in some of the downturns, specifically on large pickup trucks.
Mm-hmm.
I'll call expensive over $35,000 pickup trucks, $40,000 pickup trucks.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate you taking the question. It's not necessarily a fair one to ask. And we spent a fair amount of time talking about how ProfitTime helps you on the pricing side.
Mm-hmm.
But how might it assist you and your team on the acquisition side? And I presume you're like every other dealer,
Mm-hmm.
that you're not just looking at auctions anymore. It's buy anywhere. So
anywhere we can.
How does ProfitTime come into the picture there?
So our appraisers are all looking at it. They're looking at that. They're looking at that number and that score as they're acquiring inventory, and they understand what our pricing and exit strategy is going to be on that vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So it's allowed everyone to have an understanding of how we're going to exit a vehicle and understand, okay, well, I took in some platinums, maybe I'm taking in some bronzes, and the whole thing averages out and it works and allows us to keep doing volume, because we can't continue to take in or acquire platinum vehicles and not make the margin that we should be making on it, and then take in bronze vehicles and have a low margin on those, because at the end of the day, that just doesn't work.
Now, one thing I've heard in talking to dealers with ProfitTime is there's some, and this is really more as it relates to customer purchases, whether it's trade or off the street.
Yeah.
But they really want to see the gold or platinum box show up, or metal show up as they're trying to figure out what to offer the customer mm-hmm. for the car. So how do you manage the understanding that the car is the car, the score is the score? Mm-hmm. I assume that's how you guys think.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
So how do you get folks to resist that temptation to make it a better precious metal and sort of engineer the outcome?
Well, that's a good question. So I guess how I'd answer that is, if we can, goal number one is get the car, right? So no matter what, get the car. If you can get it in a way that it's a gold or a platinum, or in some cases even a silver, that's even better. Mm-hmm. But it is what it is. At the end of the day, anything we're going to acquire from a customer as a trade-in is going to be better than what we can get from the auction right now. So it's just having an understanding of what you're doing up front and what the exit strategy is going to be up front, rather than being surprised by it later.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, we want them all. We want everyone we can get.
And it sounds like they're empowered to do what it takes to get them. Even if it means, what might have been a gold car becomes a silver or bronze, because that's what was needed to get the car.
Absolutely.
Okay. Great. A final question, Greg. We're talking here toward the tail end of October. Mm-hmm. Which means that we're all, at least to some degree, this morning there was a catalog that came in the mail for Christmas toys, and my kids were like all stoked about it.
Oh yeah.
So we're all kind of looking ahead toward the end of the year. What would you list as you look to close out 2021 as the top 2 or 3 things on your priority list to finish the year as strong as you can?
Sure. So number one is definitely going to be used car inventory acquisition. Mm-hmm. How are we going to do that? What channels are we going to use? What are the opportunities out there to buy from private owners? Are we going? Which, by the way, we are already going to people and buying cars, mm-hmm. sometimes an hour away from us, taking them a check and collecting a title and collecting a vehicle after working a deal over the phone through text with photos of a vehicle. And so that number one is used car inventory acquisition, how's that going to look? How are we going to acquire many vehicles as possible to hit our sales goals for the rest of this year and going into 2022?
Before I need to interrupt you there, Greg, and I'm sorry for doing that. So if I understood, you're putting a number on a car based on photos, not necessarily seeing it in person and hearing it and running it.
That's correct. If that's what we have to do. So obviously what we would prefer is to have the customer come in and be able to put our hands on it, touch it, feel it, smell it, drive it. But if that's a barrier to overcome, we will overcome that by doing it that way. I mean, we've been buying cars from auctions for years using condition reports and photos, so it's really no different. So we are able to do that.
As a corollary to that, are you finding that you're getting surprises when you do acquire those cars and they move into the shop?
Some, but surprisingly, not as many as I would have thought. I would say we get more surprises from auction cars that we buy in condition reports than we do from customer cars, believe it or not.
Okay. I apologize for sidetracking you. What was priority 2?
Well, priority 2 is going to be to continue pushing our used car volume. So we're looking at doing about 9,000 used vehicles this year between our 5 locations. Looking forward to 2022, we want to be doing 10,000 next year. We did 8,000 in 2020.
Oh, wow.
So looking at next year, wanting to do 10,000. So what's that gonna look like? How are we gonna acquire the inventory to do it? For us, that's almost always the biggest piece, is how do we acquire and have enough inventory to do it? And then number 3 is going to be just to continue on this road of discipline to make money on every car where we can, and where we can't, to quickly exit those vehicles and move on to the next one.
Let me go back to your forecast there for next year. Essentially a 10% growth in volume. It seems to me that there's a little bit of a yellow flag out there possibly with, if new car supply doesn't seem like it might be that big of an issue, but perhaps it will be. How did you guys arrive at that number, and how are you guys thinking about what that might look like if new car comes back?
Well, we can't control new cars coming in. We can't control new car production. We can't control chip shortages. So we've just looked at what can we control in our business. Well, what we can control is our used car business, because that's up to us to go acquire that inventory, market that inventory, and sell that inventory. So we look at the new cars as, we're going to forecast based on what we think, but we can only control so much. The used car side of it gives us the ability to control our business and make a strategy to acquire inventory and go out and get it and make it happen.
Okay. Well, all the best to you, Greg, and your team as you guys look to close this year and head into 2022. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing your insights with us this morning.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it.
You bet. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining this episode of the vAuto podcast. Until next time, stay well.